They called her the junk lady. After a divorce that left her with nothing, Dana was mocked for starting a trash hauling business out of desperation. No one believed in her. Not her ex, not her sister, not even the clients who handed her moldy couches and broken fans. But hidden behind a dusty armoire in a decaying mansion, she found something no one expected: a painting worth $75 million. What she did next wasn't about revenge or money. It was about dignity, memory, and the kind of value people overlook every day. This isn't just a story about art. It's about what happens when a woman decides she's not disposable. Before we continue with this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, as we have a special story that'll be released soon. The courtroom was colder than she expected. Not cold in temperature, but in the way people avoid eye contact. In the way the fluorescent lights hum overhead like they're trying to drown out thoughts. She sat on the right side, third row, holding a blue pen that didn't belong to her. It had a realtor's logo on it. She had picked it up from the clerk's desk without realizing. Across the room, her ex-husband leaned back in his chair, looking bored. He wore the same gray suit he'd worn to their wedding rehearsal 15 years ago, only now it hung looser on his shoulders. He was tapping his phone with one hand and sipping from a coffee cup with the other. Legs crossed, like it was just another Monday dot. She hadn't wanted to cry that morning, and she didn't, but her face felt stiff, as though it had forgotten how to hold an expression. Her lawyer was young, kind, and quiet. She had done everything right. Filed the paperwork, outlined the property divisions, documented the savings. But none of it changed the fact that everything already felt decided. Judge's voice was steady, unemotional, moving through the final agreements like reading from a weather report. She tried to follow along something about the tax liability from the house transfer, the division of shared accounts, the business dissolution clause. Her ex didn't even look up. He just nodded when appropriate, signed where he was told. When it came time for her to sign, she hesitated for a fraction of a second, not because she wanted to change her mind. That part had already hardened weeks ago when she found the receipts in his glove compartment. What stopped her hand was the finality of it, how a signature could make 15 years vanish from legal record. She blinked once, signed, and slid the papers forward. The sound of chairs scraping signaled the end. The judge mumbled something about best of luck to both parties, but no one clapped, no one stood. Her ex had already slipped his phone into his pocket and was halfway out the door before she collected her purse. He didn't look back. Outside, the courthouse steps were damp from an early morning drizzle. She stood at the top, gripping the iron railing, watching cars pass like nothing extraordinary had just happened. It struck her then that she had nowhere to be. Her name wasn't on the mortgage anymore. The car wasn't hers. Even the coffee maker, hers since college, had ended up on his side of the settlement. She checked her phone. No messages, no missed calls. She had told no one about the final court date, not even her sister. Not because they wouldn't care, but because she couldn't bear the pity in their voices. She didn't want to be comforted. She wanted to be unseen. Walking down the steps, she realized she still had the realtor pen in her hand. She almost tossed it in a trash bin, but stopped herself. Instead, she put it in her coat pocket. It was small, useless maybe, but it was hers now. That meant something. She took the long way home, 3 buses, to transfers. Every seat felt harder than the last. She watched a mother wrangle 2 toddlers onto her lap while an elderly man coughed softly into a paper napkin. No one made eye contact. The city moved like always, indifferent to endings. By the time she reached her apartment above the hardware store, her legs ached. The walk up the stairs felt longer than usual. Inside, everything was still packed in boxes, or 2, be exact. One labeled kitchen, another Mila's school stuff, and 2 others simply labeled Misk. She didn't unpack. Not yet. She changed out of her courtroom clothes and into a paint-stained sweatshirt that still smelled like the old garage. She boiled water, poured it over a single tea bag, and stood at the window. Outside, someone was dragging an old mattress. To the curb, springs jutted out like ribs. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Just a list of what she still had. The pen, the sweatshirt, her son, the key to the apartment, and time. Time, she thought, might be the most unpredictable asset of all. She wrote down 5 words and underlined them. I still have a name. Then she closed the notebook and went to bed. The stairs creaked louder than she expected, wooden, narrow, and uneven. They groaned under the weight of each step as she climbed to the second floor above the hardware store. She didn't have a key yet, just a code on a crumpled slip of paper. The landlord had handed her in exchange for a deposit that drained the last of her savings. The door was painted a dull beige, with chipped corners and a brass handle that felt cold in her palm. She hesitated for a second before typing in the code. The lock clicked open with a mechanical sigh, like even the door was tired. Inside, the air was still. Dust hung in the corners like it had been waiting for someone to disturb it. The space was smaller than the photos had suggested, a single window looked out onto the back alley, and the kitchen was more of a suggestion than a real room, just a counter with a sink, a two-burner stove, and a mini fridge humming louder than necessary. The floors were scratched laminate, and the heater clicked to life with a cough when she flipped the wall switch. She dropped the keys on the counter and listened to the sound echo through the empty space. The boxers came in, one at a time, 4. In total, each one soft with wear, taped and retaped from years of moves. She carried them herself, stacking them against the far wall in a silent column. Each one was labeled in black marker: kitchen, books, plus photos, Milos, school stuff, and one marked simply Misk. The broken vacuum leaned in the corner, duct tape dangling from its handle like a surrender flag. She hadn't had the heart to throw it away. Not yet. She sat on the floor, knees up, arms folded. There was no couch, no table, just the low hum of the fridge and the sound of occasional footsteps from the store below. She could hear someone dragging something heavy, probably a shelf, and the muffled voice of a man arguing with someone over prices. The vibrations from the store settled into the floorboards like a heartbeat. It was strange how quiet the room felt otherwise, not peaceful, just quiet in a way that made her ears strain. In the house they used to live in, there were always sounds: dishwasher, churning TV in the background, Milo's music through the wall. Even when they weren't speaking, life had made noise. This quiet felt different. It felt hollow, like a space waiting to be filled. She opened the kitchen box first. 2 chipped plates, 3 mismatched mugs, a pan with a loose handle. The French press, cracked, but still usable. She set each item carefully on the counter, as if their placement mattered. One mug still had faint lipstick on the rim from the last morning. She drank coffee while standing barefoot in the driveway, pretending not to notice her husband's car wasn't there again. By the time she opened the second box, it was nearly dark. She didn't realize it until the window turned black and the ceiling light flickered on, casting a yellow glow that made the room feel even smaller. The books plus photos box smelled like dust and printer ink. She pulled out a photo frame, her and Milo at the beach, both squinting into the sun, sand in their hair. He had been 10. She set it on the windowsill, not because it was the best place, but because it felt like it needed to be seen. She didn't touch the third box, Milo's. School things would stay closed until he came over next weekend. He hadn't seen the apartment yet. She wanted it to be more than this when he did. She wanted a table, a bed with a real frame, something warm on the walls, something that didn't feel like starting over. The last box stayed sealed. Misk. She couldn't remember what she'd thrown into it. Probably the things that didn't make sense anywhere else. Old scarves, a wedding photo she hadn't decided to keep or throw away, the drawing Milo made in 2nd grade that she used to keep on the fridge. She lay down on the floor without a pillow, using her coat as a blanket. The heater kicked on again with a cough. From below, a radio played softly a crackly tune from decades ago. She closed her eyes and listened to the building breathing around her, the sound of other people's lives happening beneath her feet. There was no furniture, no comfort, and no plan yet. But there was space and silence, and for boxers that still held pieces of her past. She didn't know what came next, but for the first time in a long while, no one else was making the decisions for her. She was up by 6 most mornings, sitting at the small kitchen counter with a mug of instant coffee and a notepad covered in scribbled reminders. The coffee always tasted faintly of cardboard, and the notebook was bent from being carried to many places, but both had become part of her new routine. It felt like movement, even if it didn't go anywhere. The job board refreshed hourly. Her browser history was a carousel of applications, cover letters, and rejections. She adjusted her resume 5 different ways. Too much experience, not enough. She'd removed the director title once, thinking it might intimidate a hiring manager for an entry-level front desk job at a dental office. Another time, she emphasized her communication skills and left out her master's degree entirely. None of it seemed to matter. The first interview was at a corporate office downtown. They needed someone to handle phones and appointment scheduling. The woman across the desk smiled tightly the entire time, nodding too quickly and glancing at the clock behind her. "We're very accomplished," she said, flipping through the resume with distracted fingers. "Honestly, we're just concerned you'd be bored here." She smiled politely, thanked her, and walked out knowing they'd never call. The next was a cleaning job at a boutique hotel. She had scrubbed bathrooms in college and didn't mind hard work. The supervisor looked at her hands for too long, then at her age, then back at the clipboard. "We usually hire younger," he said awkwardly, like that made it less cruel. "There's some heavy lifting involved." She offered to show she could do it, but he waved her off and said they'd let her know. They didn't. By the second week, her inbox was a graveyard of polite declines. "We've chosen to move forward with another candidate. We appreciate your interest. Best of luck in your job search." The words blurred together until they lost shape. Like static on a radio, she tried the staffing agency down by the gas station. It smelled like paper and tired coffee, and the receptionist wore a headset she never seemed to take off. A man named Curtis led her through a short intake interview, glancing occasionally at the computer screen as he asked questions. "Ever driven a forklift?" She shook her head. "Can you type 50 words per minute?" She nodded. "How are you with Excel?" She tried to sound upbeat, familiar, intermediate level. Curtis frowned slightly. "You've got a strong background, but some of our clients might see you as a flight risk. I'm not looking to leave," she said quietly. "I just need a job." He nodded sympathetically, but she could tell it was already decided. They'd call if anything came up. It became a rhythm put on the good sweater, print out copies of her resume at the library, take the bus across town for another interview, another tour, another smiling manager saying, "You're not quite the right fit." The words started to feel like code. Too old, too experienced, too divorced. Too much. One afternoon, she returned home after walking nearly 3 miles in the rain, shoes soaked and thighs aching. She dropped her bag by the door and peeled off her jacket, too tired to make coffee. The voicemail light blinked on her phone. She hit play and listened to a chipper voice from a call center position she had applied to. "Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to go with a candidate whose background more closely aligns with the role." She stood there, dripping onto the laminate floor, not angry, just hollow. There was no room for anger anymore. Only the dull weight of disappointment pressing down again and again, as if the world kept handing her empty boxes marked opportunity. That night, Milo called from his dad's. She didn't tell him about the jobs. She just asked how school was and whether he still liked the science teacher with the blue glasses. He said he missed her lasagna. She smiled at the thought. After the call, she stared at the ceiling, wondering what made a person employable. Maybe it was youth. Maybe it was knowing someone. Or maybe it was not having baggage that made people look twice at your file before. They tossed it to the side. She reached for the notebook on the nightstand, wrote the date at the top, then paused. No job leads today, no interviews tomorrow, but the pen still moved because writing it down was still a way of showing up, of saying she hadn't disappeared yet. She wasn't even looking for work when she saw the ad. It was late, nearly midnight, and she had already brushed her teeth. But the silence of the apartment felt heavy that night, and sleep wouldn't come. She sat on the floor with her laptop, balanced on her knees, aimlessly scrolling through community listings on Craigslist, not for jobs, really, but for something that felt like movement, some corner of the world still turning. The post was buried under garage sale announcements and couch for pickup listings. Freelance haulers needed trucks A+ cash daily. There was no logo, no company name, just a phone number and 3 lines of blocky text. She clicked out of it and kept scrolling. But her mind circled back, not because it was promising. It wasn't. But because it was so strange. People were being paid to haul away junk mattresses, broken desks, rotting furniture, things no one wanted. Things most people paid to forget. It sounded exhausting, messy, maybe even dangerous. But it also sounded open. No mention of resumes, no age restrictions, no talk of being a good cultural fit. Just work. Cash. Show up. All things get paid. She opened the ad again and stared at it. The words looked different now. She shut the laptop and went to bed. But the next morning, the idea stayed. Not as a plan, not yet, but like a pebble in her shoe she couldn't shake loose. It followed her into the kitchen while she boiled water. It trailed her to the window while she watched the alley below. She thought about the broken vacuum in the corner, the mattress someone left leaning against the dumpster. The dozen times she'd cleaned out drawers and closets after the divorce. Realizing how much of life became useless after it stopped belonging to someone, she didn't own a truck. She didn't have a dolly, or a uniform, or a plan. But she did know how to work, and for the first time in weeks, that felt like something. That afternoon, she walked to the corner print shop and made 25 black and white flyers. They were simple as just her first name, a cheap logo she sketched on paper and scanned, and a line that said, "Affordable, hauling fast, careful, discreet. Call Dana." She debated adding single mom to the flyer, but decided against it. People didn't need her story. They just needed to know she would show up. She spent the evening taping them to utility poles, bus stop shelters, and community bulletin boards, the grocery store, the laundromat, the senior center near the post office. Her hands were cold, the tape curled in the wind, and a few people gave her strange looks. But she kept going. Back at the apartment, she stared at her phone for an hour, willing it to ring. It didn't, not that night, or the next. On the third day, she got a text. "You still do junk pickups. Got a garage full of old boxers, can pay cash." She stared at it like it was written in another language. Then she typed back, "Yes. What day works for you?" The address came through within minutes. She borrowed her neighbor's pickup offering, gas money, and a home-cooked meal. She hadn't made yet and arrived at the house just past noon. The man was in his 70s, cane in one hand and a tired smile on his face. "Just about everything in there can go," he said, gesturing toward the cluttered garage. "Wife passed last year, been meaning to clear it." She didn't ask questions, just rolled up her sleeves and started lifting. Boxes of magazines, an old broken dryer, gardening tools with rusted handles. It took 3 hours, a sore back, and a few splinters. When she was done, he handed her $120 in folded bills and said, "You've got a strong back for someone. They keep calling to qualified." She smiled, not sure what to say. But on the way home, she looked at her hands' dirt under the nails. Fingers aching and felt something settle in her chest. It wasn't pretty work, but it was hers. She bought the gloves first, thick, rubber-coated ones that reached past her wrists. They were too big, even in the smallest size, but she liked how they made her feel, shielded, prepared. Next came the boots, secondhand, from a workwear store. 2 towns over, steel-toed, scratched at the heels, and heavier than any shoes she'd worn in her old life. They changed the way she moved, planted her. The truck came next. Not a purchase she couldn't afford that, but a weekly rental from a local guy named Theo who ran a side business, leasing out his fleet to landscapers and movers. She'd met him through a man at the laundromat who'd noticed her taping up another flyer. "You hauling furniture or chasing ghosts?" he'd asked with a grin. She didn't laugh. She just asked for a name. Theo was skeptical at first. Gave her a long look when she said it was just her. No crew, no company, no husband helping out. But money was money. And when she handed over the rental fee in cash and promised to return the truck full of gas and without dings, he agreed. "Weak," he said, handing over the keys. "You break it, you buy it." The first day she drove the truck, her hands shook on the steering wheel. It was big, it rattled when it braked. The mirrors stuck out like ears, and she couldn't tell how far back the bed extended, but by the end of the day, her palms stopped sweating. By the end of the week, she could back it into a narrow driveway without checking the curb twice. The flyers became sharper, cleaner. She redesigned them on the free version of a design site, added a tagline, "You point, I haul, no judgment." "No hassle," she added, "color yellow and grand." Printed 50 copies at the library, cutting them by hand at her kitchen counter with a pair of old scissors. Her fingers ached by the end, but the stack looked official, professional, even her sister called while she was halfway through her second batch, so Junk removal. That's really what you're doing now. Dana balanced the phone on her shoulder and kept cutting. I'm trying something, she said. There was a pause. You know, it just sounds like, I don't know, a midlife crisis in work boots. Dana didn't respond at first, just kept trimming the corners until they looked clean. It's work, she said finally. Sure, her sister replied. I just worry you're throwing yourself into something that isn't, sustainable or healthy. Are you okay? I'm fine, Dana said, and hung up before her voice could tremble. Her ex called later that week. It was supposed to be about Milo's dentist appointment, but the tone of his voice shifted halfway through. I heard from Cheryl you're doing some kind of hauling thing now, he said, stretching the words like they didn't quite belong in his mouth. Dana stared out the window at a torn flyer flapping on the pole outside. Yeah, there was a smirk in his voice, even though she couldn't see him. You went from managing a department to hauling people's trash. That's wow, she didn't say anything. I mean, look, if you need help, I'm not heartless. I can front you some money if this is a rough patch. She nearly laughed, and not because it was funny, but because it was so familiar, the condescension wrapped in concern. The idea that her failure was inevitable, and he was still the one with the lifeline. I don't need your help, she said, calm. There was silence on the other end, then a sigh. Well, I hope you know what you're doing. It just sounds sad. She ended the call without saying goodbye. That night, she sat on the floor, surrounded by a roll of trash bags, a borrowed dolly, and a binder she was filling with job receipts. The apartment smelled faintly of rubber gloves and sweat. Her hands were sore. Her boots leaned against the wall, still coated in dust from the retirement home attic she'd cleaned out that afternoon. She looked at the scraps of her new life gritty, tired and loud in a way her old one never was. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel sad at all. The house was smaller than she expected, nestled between two larger ones that had clearly been renovated in the last decade. Faded shutters clung to cracked siding, and the front steps slanted slightly, as if the ground had shifted over time, and the house hadn't caught up. She parked the truck on the street, double-checked the address on her clipboard, and stepped out onto the sidewalk with her gloves in one pocket and a clipboard in the other. A soft knock brought no answer at first. She waited, then knocked again, louder this time. Finally, the door creaked open just a few inches, and a face appeared, framed by thick glasses and a halo of silver-white hair. You're here for the couch? The woman asked, voice thin but steady. Yes, ma'am, and whatever else you need. Gone? Dana replied. The woman nodded and stepped back, opening the door fully. She didn't smile, but she wasn't unfriendly either, just tired maybe. She wore a long cardigan with deep pockets and shuffled ahead of Dana into the narrow living room. The smell hit first damp, earthy, like a basement after a flood. Couch sat against the far wall, its cushions misshapen and darkened with time. One arm was torn, the fabric sagging, and the center was stained a deep brown Dana chose not to identify. 3 old box fans sat in the corner with wires trailing like vines, and a narrow bookcase lay tipped on its side. Half its shelves splintered, and the other half empty. I was going to have my nephew do it, the woman said, watching Dana survey the room, but he's always busy. Figured I'd hire someone who could use the work. Dana nodded and stepped forward, testing the couch's weight. It was heavier than it looked, springs, groaning as she lifted one end, but she managed. To slide it enough to clear the path, she moved slowly, methodically, protecting the doorframe and checking the corners as she went. The couch snagged once on a strip of worn carpet, but she adjusted her grip and got it out the door. Each of the fans was missing something, grills cracked, blades chipped, one cord duct-taped in 3 places. She carried them in one armload, careful not to let the sharp edges press into her side. The bookshelf was trickier, warped and unwieldy, its particle board frame sagging when she lifted it. She maneuvered it sideways through the door and laid it gently in the bed of the truck. Inside, the woman hadn't moved. She stood near the kitchen threshold, hands in her cardigan pockets, eyes following every motion. I can sweep up in here. If you'd like, Dana offered, brushing dust from her sleeves. The woman shook her head. No need. I just needed it gone. Dana wrote out a simple receipt, no fancy logo yet, just her name and the total. When she turned to hand it over, the woman was holding a folded $10 bill in one hand and something smaller in the other. You charge fair, the woman said, placing the bill in Dana's palm, "but this is for you." Dana started to protest, but the woman was already closing her hand around it. "You've got a good heart," she said. It's rare these days to see someone do hard work without rolling their eyes about it. Dana stood still, unsure what to say. She wasn't used to kindness that came without strings or apologies. She just nodded, once dot, as she walked back to the truck. The sun peeked through the clouds in a way that didn't feel dramatic, just honest. She sat behind the wheel and looked at the bill in her hand. It was soft from age, folded twice, with a handwritten note tucked inside. "Thank you for showing up." She didn't cry, she didn't smile. She just sat there for a minute longer before turning the key in the ignition. It was a small job, mold, dust, broken fans. But the house was a little lighter now, and so was she. It started in line at the grocery store. She was buying trash bags and bottled water. Her hair pulled back under a baseball cap still stained with drywall dust from a cleanup job earlier that morning. The woman ahead of her, someone vaguely familiar from Milo's old elementary school, turned, looked her up and down, and gave a tight, polite smile. The kind that didn't reach the eyes, the kind that said, "I think I know who you used to be, Dot." Dana opened her mouth to say hello, but the woman had already turned away, speaking softly to the man beside her. She didn't catch the words, but she didn't have to. She knew the look. By the time she got home, it had already burrowed into her mind. The slight glances, the not quite smiles, the way people would say her name like it was something delicate they didn't want to touch. Dana, the one with the truck now. Dana, who used to be married to Mark, right? She used to work at the college, didn't she? Her phone buzzed the next day with a message from one of the mothers she used to see at bake sales and fundraisers. "Hey, just curious, is it true? You're doing junk removal now? Like, full time. No context. No how are you. Just curiosity, dressed up as politeness." She typed a short reply, "Yes, it's my business now." The message was marked "Read," but there was no response. She began noticing it in the way kids pointed at the truck as she drove through residential streets. It wasn't malicious, just the way children look at things that don't make sense to them. A woman driving a beat-up hauler with gloves in the front seat and bags of junk strapped in the back. One boy, riding his bike, even called out once, loud enough for her to hear through the window, "Hey, it's the junk lady." He laughed as he pedaled away, not cruelly, just loudly, without the filter adults learn to wear. She told herself it didn't matter. She was working, she was feeding her son, she was showing up, but the silence was harder than the whispers. Old friends stopped texting back. People she had known through years of school events, board meetings, weekend potlucks, they simply vanished. Invitations stopped. Group chats shifted. When she commented on someone's photo, it was met with a polite heart emoji, never a response. It wasn't confrontation, it was absence. And somehow, that felt worse. One afternoon, she saw a former coworker from the college walking out of the pharmacy. Dana called her name. The woman hesitated, then turned slowly. "Oh," she said, adjusting her sunglasses. "Hi, wow, it's been a while." Dana smiled. "Yeah, how've you been?" The woman nodded vaguely. "Busy, you know, work, life." "I heard you're doing your own thing now?" She didn't wait for an answer, just said, "Well, I hope it works out," and walked off, her heels clicking confidently against the pavement. Dana stood there, holding a bottle of ibuprofen and a half-used gift card. Unsure if she felt angry or just tired, she tried not to bring it up around Milo. He didn't need to know what the world was saying, but he noticed things in the way teenagers do. When they were eating dinner one night, frozen lasagna and garlic bread, he said casually, "Saw some kids at school call your truck the scrap queen." He grinned. "Better than junk lady, right?" She smirked, shaking her head. "Scrap queen? That's terrible." "They said it like it was cool, though," he added, taking another bite. "Like you're in charge of it or something." She looked at him, his hair too long, his plate already half empty, and something in her chest softened. Maybe the world didn't need to understand. Maybe the people whispering wouldn't ever see what I saw, what Milo saw. She was working. She was standing on her own 2 feet. The names didn't matter. But even so, when she passed the grocery store the next day, she held her head just a little higher. Let them whisper. She had trash to move, money to make, and a purpose no one could take away. The kitchen barely counted as a kitchen, just a strip of countertop, a sink that groaned whenever the faucet turned, and a fridge that rattled like it was housing something alive. The stove was electric, 2 burners, and one of them hadn't worked since the second week. A single shelf held 3 mismatched plates and a coffee mug that had survived 4 apartments and a divorce. The light above flickered sometimes, especially when the microwave was running. Still, it was theirs. That night, like many others, dinner came in a crumpled brown bag with grease blooming through the paper. 2 burgers, no fries. They'd skipped those to stay under the $10 mark. She'd picked them up from the corner diner after finishing a basement cleanup on the edge of town. The job had taken longer than expected. The family had been kind, offering her lemonade and cold towels, but the work had been heavy old mattresses, damp boxes, shelves warped with mold. She could still smell the mildew in her clothes. Milo had already set the crates by the time she got home. 2 old milk crates she'd found behind the store, wiped down and flipped up. They used one for a table, the other 2 as seats. It was always the same routine: paper towels as napkins, tap water in old jam jars, and just enough room between them to make it feel like a dinner table. She handed him his burger and sat across from him, stretching her back with a quiet groan. "Rough one?" he asked, unwrapping his food. "Basement was full of wet cardboard and spider nests," she said. "I think one of them hissed at me." Milo laughed through a mouthful. "Going to come home with superpowers one day?" She smiled, picking at the edge of her wrapper. "Let's hope it's something useful, like the ability to lift a fridge without throwing out my back." They ate in the soft hum of the apartment's quiet. The fridge buzzed periodically, and a car alarm wailed faintly from somewhere down the block. She watched her son eat, his head bent slightly, hair falling into his eyes. He'd grown so fast that year, taller than her now, with broader shoulders and a voice that didn't crack anymore. He hadn't said much about the move, or the divorce, or the truck she drove every day. But he showed up, did his homework, charged her portable drill, occasionally swept the floor without being asked. That was how she knew he understood more than he let on. "You ever miss the old house?" she asked, not looking up. Milo shrugged. "Sometimes. The kitchen was bigger." "Yeah, and it had an actual table." He glanced around their little space. "This works." She looked at him then, really looked, his calm expression, his steady hands. He never complained, not when the hot water ran out, not when the power flickered, not when dinner was whatever she could buy for under $10. He hadn't asked for new shoes, even though his were worn at the toes. He hadn't asked for more space, even though his mattress sat on the floor of a room barely wider than his wingspan. She reached out and touched his hand. Just for a second, he didn't pull away. "You doing okay?" she asked. He nodded. "I like when you talk about work. It's cooler than people think." She raised an eyebrow. "Cooler?" "Well, not like superhero cool," he said, smirking, "but kind of. You go into people's basements, garages, attics. You find weird stuff. You make things cleaner, lighter." She laughed softly. "It's mostly just moving junk." "Still," he said. "You show up, you always show up." She looked down at the last bite of her burger and felt something warm settle in her chest. The kind of warmth that didn't come from money or comfort, but from knowing someone saw her, truly saw her. In the quiet, on the crates, under the flickering light, this was a dinner she would remember. Milo gathered the wrappers and dropped them into the bin without being asked. She poured the rest of the water down the sink, rinsed the jam jars, and stacked them neatly on the shelf. Later, as she lay in bed listening to the rumble of the truck engine still ringing in her ears, she thought of the phrase dumpster dinner. It sounded harsh, but somehow fitting. Not because it was cheap, but because it was real. It was earned. And Milo never complained. That meant everything. By 4 a.m, the city still felt half asleep. The streetlights buzzed over rows of parked cars, casting pale cones of light onto quiet pavement. Dana pulled on her boots in the dim glow of the kitchen, careful not to wake Milo. Started sleeping with one arm slung over his face lately, as if the world was too much, even in dreams. She poured lukewarm coffee from the thermos. She'd filled the night before, no time to make a fresh pot. The coffee wasn't the point anyway, it was just a reason to hold something warm in her hands, while the rest of the world stayed cold, In the back of the truck sat a stack of flyers freshly printed, trimmed by hand, and sealed in a plastic bag to protect them from the dew. The corners were sharp, the text simple. You point, I haul affordable junk removal, call Dana. She added a small line at the bottom that said, support local, support a mom. The first lot was behind a gas station tucked beside, a chain-link fence and a row of dumpsters that always overflowed. She slipped flyers under windshield wipers in silence, quick but deliberate. One per car, never on a cracked windshield, never if it looked like someone lived inside. She moved from lot to lot behind strip malls, outside apartment complexes, down the side streets near the medical center. The city was full of cars parked in long, still rows, each one a possible client, or at least a passerby who might remember her number. When a couch needed lifting or a shed needed emptying, some lots were easier than others. In the early light, raccoons skittered behind dumpsters, and sprinklers clicked on in sudden, startling bursts. Once, a security guard approached her in a church parking lot, suspicion in his voice. "What are you doing out here?" She held up a flyer like a badge, just trying to get work. He watched her for a long moment, then nodded. "Leave one on mine too." Other mornings were colder. Wind would tug the flyers loose. A few would be crumpled or torn by She saw one stuck in a puddle once, tire tracks pressed through the ink. Another time, she passed a car where a kid had scrawled something in pen across her flyer. Junk lately. She didn't keep that one. But sometimes her phone rang. "Hey, saw your flyer on my windshield. Got a garage full of stuff from my dad's place." Or, "I've got old office chairs I need gone." You do upstairs hauling, those calls mattered. Each one felt like proofs, small, stubborn proof that her effort was not in vain. She kept a log in her notebook, scribbling the date, the call, the job, the payment. Some days she got one call, some days none, but she never skipped a morning. One day, she hung a flyer at the grocery store bulletin board. By evening, it was gone. She assumed someone had ripped it down until the next day, when she received a call from a woman who ran a daycare. "You, the one with the yellow flyers?" I liked how clear it was. "I need someone who will show up." Another time, someone left. A voicemail that said, "I'm not calling about hauling. I just wanted to say I respect the hustle. Keep going." No name, no number, just a voice. It was always like that, a mix of nothing and something, of doors quietly closing and others quietly opening. She didn't expect miracles. She just wanted enough calls to cover rent, gas, and groceries. Enough to keep Milo's shoes from wearing through. Enough to prove she wasn't fading. By 7 a.m., the city began to stir. Headlights flickered on. Dog walkers appeared. Windows lit up in apartment buildings. Dana would return home just as the sun stretched into the alleyway. She'd peel off her gloves, pour the last of the coffee, and sit at the window, watching people get ready for their day. Not knowing someone had walked their street hours before, leaving signs behind, quiet, hopeful signs that someone out there was still trying. And sometimes that was all it took. One flyer, one windshield, one call. The house sat at the edge of town, quiet and hunched beneath a canopy of overgrown trees. The lawn hadn't been mowed in years, and ivy clung to the siding like it was trying to pull the house into the earth. Dana pulled up behind a rusted mailbox. That listed no number, just a faded strip of duct tape where one must have once been. The client had met her in person, a woman named Lorraine, with soft eyes and a tremor in her voice, who had inherited the house from a cousin she hadn't spoken to in over a decade. "It's mostly just papers and clothes," Lorraine had said on the phone. "But the basement? It's bad. I can't go down there myself." Dana had nodded, though Lorraine couldn't see her. "I'll take care of it." When she stepped inside, the smell met her first, stale, acidic, thick with time, the kind of smell that settles into the walls and never leaves. Every room was filled, not just cluttered filled, boxers, newspapers, stacks of old tins, folded clothes, empty bottles. The floor creaked underfoot, not from age, but from the weight of forgotten things. The basement door was at the back of the kitchen, half blocked by a broken refrigerator. She slid it aside carefully, gloves already on, mask snug over her face. When she opened the door, the air changed cooler but heavier. Like the house had been holding its breath down there, she flipped the switch. Nothing. She'd brought her flashlight just in case. Each step groaned as she descended. The light from above faded quickly, replaced by the yellow beam that danced across piles of debris. It was worse than she'd expected. Floor to ceiling, boxers spilling open with brittle papers, towers of magazines threatening to collapse, mold creeping across entire shelves of unopened canned food. Dolls with cracked faces stared from the corners. A television with no screen sat atop a pile of record players. She didn't know where to begin, so she started small, one bag at a time, one box, then another. She sorted what could be recycled, what had to be tossed, what was sharp, what was rotting. The mask helped with the smell, but not enough. Her eyes stung. Her legs shook from crouching. After the first hour, her shirt clung to her back. She found a jar of teeth. That was the first time she cried. She didn't mean to. She just stared at its glass-fogged lid. Rusted on, the tears came fast, not out of fear or disgust, but something more complicated, a wave of sorrow for the person who had kept it. For the years that had passed in silence, for the way a house could swallow someone whole without anyone noticing. She wiped her eyes on her sleeve and kept going. By the third hour, she'd cleared a path to what looked like an old filing cabinet. It leaned at an angle, half buried beneath coats and books and boxes of tangled cords. She pried it open carefully, not expecting much. Most of the drawers were stuffed with yellowed tax forms and unopened mail, but in the back of the bottom drawer, wedged between two collapsed folders, was a single envelope, white, still sealed. With a 20-cent stamp in the corner, no return address, just a name in looping cursive, Marion Clark. Postmarked June 3rd, 1983. She sat down right there on the concrete and held it in her gloved hands. It hadn't been opened. 40 years had passed, and whatever words were inside had stayed unread. She didn't open, it didn't feel like it was hers to touch. Instead, she placed it in a clean plastic bag and wrote "Do not discard" in black marker across the top. When she climbed back up the stairs, blinking against the sudden light, Lorraine was waiting in the doorway. "You okay?" she asked. Dana nodded slowly, brushing dust from her sleeve. "I found a letter from 1983, still sealed. Might be important." Lorraine took the bag in both hands and stared at it for a long time. Then, very softly, she said, "That's Marion. She disappeared the year I graduated." Neither spoke for a moment. Dana hauled 20 bags out that afternoon. Her arms ached. Her knees were bruised. But as she drove away, she looked at the mirror and saw something steady in her face. The house had been filled with everything a person could forget, but she had remembered something. Something small, quiet, and waiting. And maybe that mattered more than anything else she'd carried out. The post office was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that wrapped around the ankles like fog. Dana stood in line with a bundle of manila envelopes under one arm, each one holding an invoice or flyer or receipt from her growing pile of jobs. She had started mailing handwritten thank you notes to certain clients, just a small gesture to stand out. Cheap stationery, her name signed in ink, and a short line that always ended with, "Thank you for trusting me with your space." In front of her, 2 women stood whispering. They were older, dressed in quilted jackets, their hair done in the same short style she'd seen on every woman over 60 in town. Their voices weren't exactly loud, but they weren't trying to be quiet either. "She drives that big truck, doesn't she? The red one with the dented side? Hum, junk hauler, poor thing. I heard she used to teach or something. I saw her pulling a moldy mattress into the back one day. Alone, that's not a job for a woman." Dana kept her eyes on the counter. She didn't flinch, didn't sigh. Just stepped forward when it was her turn, handed over her mail, and thanked the clerk like nothing had been said. The envelopes slid into the outgoing bin with a dull shuffle. She turned to leave, careful not to look back at the 2 women still whispering about her boots, or her truck, or whatever version of her life they thought they understood outside. The air was sharp. The sky was clear. She pulled her collar tighter and headed toward the parking lot. That's when she heard the voice behind her, measured, gentle, with a worn clarity that sounded like it belonged behind a desk piled with hardback novels. "I heard them talking," the woman said. "Don't mind them." Dana turned. The woman was in her 70s, maybe older, with silver hair pulled back in a low braid and glasses that magnified eyes full of something stronger than pity, something closer to recognition. "I'm retired now," she added. "Used to be the head librarian at Bardenville Public." Dana nodded. I remember that library. My son used to hide under the beanbag chairs there. The woman smiled. That was probably Milo then. I remember the name. There was a pause. The parking lot buzzed with the slow shuffle of morning traffic. Dana shifted her weight, ready to nod politely and move on. But the woman stepped closer, her hands tucked into the pockets of a well-worn wool coat. I have a job for you, she said. Not big, not urgent. Just some old shelves in the garage I can't lift anymore. But mostly, I just want to give. Work to someone who's doing something honest. Dana blinked. Are you sure? I don't want you to feel like I've watched this town long enough to know when someone is being underestimated. The woman said plainly. And I've also learned that people don't see courage until it's safe. Until the dust settles and they can pretend they admired you all along. Dana didn't know what to say. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. You remind me of someone, the librarian continued. A woman who used to fix shoes down by the train depot. She raised 4 boys alone. People used to whisper about her too. Then one day, the mayor gave her a community service award. All those same people clapped. Dana let out a soft laugh. Sounds about right. So let them talk, the woman said. Just keep showing up. Eventually, they'll catch up to the truth. The job was small. Old bookshelves, a broken desk lamp, and a box of gardening tools. But Dana did it carefully, thoroughly. The woman paid in cash and handed over a jar of homemade strawberry jam as a thank you that night. Dana set the jar on the counter and stared at it for a long while before unscrewing the lid. She made toast. Milo was already asleep, so she ate. In silence, the jam bright and sweet on her tongue. She didn't need a parade, just one person who saw her clearly. And sometimes, that was enough to keep going. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of day that starts off looking normal blue sky, coffee gone cold on the counter. Keys in the ignition by 6:45 a.m., she had 3 pickups scheduled, an old piano in a foreclosed bungalow, some yard waste for a contractor she'd worked with before, and a shed cleanup out near the hills. Nothing out of the ordinary. But the second she turned the corner onto 5th Street, the truck let out a groan low deep, then sharp followed by a clunk that she felt in her ribs. She pulled over fast. The smell of burning oil hit her before she even opened the hood. The engine hissed like it was angry. She stood on the curb in her work gloves, staring down at the mess of parts and hoses like it might fix itself if she looked concerned enough. She tried turning it back on. Nothing, just a sputter and silence. An hour later, after a tow and a too-long wait in a grimy auto shop, the verdict came in. Transmission failure. A full replacement needed. Price tag. Over $2,000. Dana sat in the corner chair, knee throbbing from an awkward twist during her last pickup the day before. Phone in her hand, eyes on the tile floor. 2,000 might as well have been 20. She walked the 3 miles back to the apartment. The sun had dipped below the buildings. By the time she turned the key in the lock, her knee locked halfway up the stairs, and she had to brace herself on the rail to finish the climb. She didn't cry, not yet. Just moved slow, careful, bone-dash tired. Milo looked up from the couch the second she walked in. What happened? She sat down, removing her boot 1 finger at a time. Truck's dead. Transmission's shot. How much? She hesitated. Too much. He stood quietly watching her. Then, without a word, he disappeared into his room. She didn't follow. She just closed her eyes and leaned back against the wall, trying to figure out what came next. She couldn't rent another truck. They needed mileage. They needed hauling capacity. And she couldn't afford to turn down jobs. Not now, not when. Things had just started to feel steady. When Milo returned, he held out an envelope. She frowned. What's that? He sat beside her. It's the college account. Not all of it, but most. A couple thousand. It's yours. She didn't take it. She didn't even look inside. Milono. Mom, why not? Because that's your future. He stared at her. And this isn't yours. His voice didn't rise. It stayed steady. That's what broke her. She looked away, blinking too. Fast. I've worked too hard for you to have options. You're not using them on a busted truck. But what if this is the option? He asked. What if I want to help you do this right? She shook her head, pressing the envelope back. Into his hands. Not like this. I'll figure something out. I always do. They sat in silence after that, the envelope unopened between them. Outside, the hum of the street lamp flickered, buzzing faintly through the window. She didn't sleep that night. Her knee throbbed in waves, and she kept turning over numbers. In her head, jobs she could reschedule, tools she could pawn, things she could cut back on. By morning, her solution was a patchwork of maybes. None perfect, but enough to start. She called a scrapyard to ask about hauling for parts. She posted a message on her local site offering weekend cleanouts at a discount, and she limped to the bus stop with her flyers in hand, ready to walk neighborhoods again. By noon, she had 3 potential clients. One of them paid in cash that same afternoon. It wasn't enough to fix the truck, not yet. But it was a crack of light in the door that evening. When Milo asked what they were going to do next, she smiled, slow but certain. "We're going to keep moving," she said. 1 working knee, 1 busted truck, and 2 stubborn hearts. And that would have to be enough. The shirts were folded in a box she'd almost thrown out twice. Faded navy blue, soft from years of wash cycles, and just big enough to hide the bruises on her arms from lifting too much alone. They weren't special. No brand tags, no embroidery. Just leftovers from a thrift store bundle she'd picked up last year when she thought she'd need business casual for temp work. But now, they sat on her kitchen table, waiting for something else, a new kind of beginning. Dana sat down, her sewing kit beside them. A plastic container with a cracked lid full of needles, spools of thread, and an old pair of orange-handled scissors that barely cut clean anymore. She'd found them again while cleaning out a client's garage, tucked in a drawer under a pile of holiday candles. Most people would have tossed them. She saw used. The logo had taken her weeks to sketch. She'd gone through 6 pages of scribbled ideas, some with brooms, some with trucks, some with wings. She settled on a sturdy pair of hands lifting a sun from behind a pile of broken objects. Milo had said it looked hopeful, but not cheesy. That was enough for her. She transferred the design onto fabric with carbon paper she found at the dollar store. Then, so slowly, began stitching the outline in black thread. Every night, for 2 weeks, she sat at the end of the table. Fingers cramped, back sore, stitching while dinner reheated and the laundry cycled. The name came next. She practiced it 5 times before committing. Dana, just her first name, embroidered in red thread on the right side of the chest. She didn't want anything formal, just something that said, "I'm here. I'm the one who'll show up. This is me." By the 3rd shirt, her fingers were raw. She poked herself enough times that a small smear of blood appeared on the edge of one logo. She washed it out with cold water and whispered, "Battle scars." Milo glanced up from the couch and smiled. When she finally pulled the finished shirt over her head that Friday morning, something shifted. It wasn't just the fabric, it was the weight of something earned. The logo sat neatly on the left side of her chest. Her name stitched in bright red sat over her heart. It didn't look like much. The lines weren't perfectly even. The D leaned slightly left, but it was hers. She walked to the truck wearing it, even with the dented bumper and the squeaky rearview mirror. The truck suddenly felt different, like they were both part of something now. She caught a glimpse of herself in a shop window as she passed. Shirt tucked, boots laced, gloves hooked to her belt loop. For the first time, she looked like the kind of worker she used to call for help. That made her pause. Her first client, the dentist widow downsizing to a condo, opened the door and said, "You look like you run a whole fleet." Dana laughed. "Just me, for now." "Well," the woman replied, "I trust a name on a shirt means you care enough to wear one." The job was small, just a few dressers and an old rug, but the compliment carried her through the rest of the day. At the grocery store later, someone tapped her shoulder. "Are you the one with the junk service? I think I saw your flyer." Dana nodded. "That's me." The woman smiled. "Nice logo." That night, she folded the shirt neatly, the patch with her palm, before placing it on the back of a chair. It wasn't clean anymore. Dust streaked across the sleeve, and a nail had torn the seam under one arm. But she didn't care. It was a uniform now, not given, not assigned. Made, and every stitch, every thread, every loop of color that was her story sewn in. Not a company, not a brand, a person. One who refused to disappear. The call came late in the afternoon, just as Dana was finishing a cleanup job behind a dentist's office. Her back ached, and her gloves were damp from hours of lifting broken filing cabinets and cracked vinyl chairs. She almost let the call go to voicemail, but something in the area code caught her attention. Local, but not familiar. "Is this Dana?" the voice asked. A man older, precise in speech. "Yes, speaking. I got your number from a flyer posted near the courthouse. I'm the executor of an estate in Westmore. The property needs to be cleared out by next Friday. The owner passed last month. No family, just an old will and a big house full of belongings." Dana wiped sweat from her forehead with her sleeve. "What kind of belongings? Furniture? Paperwork? Paintings? Clothing? A lot of it's been untouched for years. You'd be doing us a favor." She didn't hesitate. "Text me the address. I'll come by tomorrow." The house was unlike anything she'd worked in before. It sat at the top of a long gravel driveway hidden behind a wrought-iron gate. She'd driven past this part of Westmore before, but never noticed it partially hidden by trees, the kind of place you didn't see unless you were looking for it. The gate had been left open for her. The house itself was massive Victorian, slate gray with shuttered windows and gables that jutted out like watchful eyes. Ivy curled along the baseboards, and a stone fountain in the front yard was long dried. The statue of a weeping angel, chipped and leaning Dot, she parked the truck near the back entrance. The executor, a thin man in his 60s wearing a cardigan and slacks too neat for a property. Like this met her on the porch. The deceased was Miss Evelyn Hart. You may have heard of her. Dana hadn't. He didn't seem surprised. Family was old money, but she lived the last 20 years alone. Reclusive, never updated the house. Utilities are still on, but I wouldn't linger upstairs. Mold issues? The front door creaked when he opened it, and the smell hit immediately. Mothballs, mildew, wet wood, and the faint stale perfume of dust-coated furniture. It wasn't rotten, just forgotten. Dana stepped inside slowly, her boots thudding against the creaky floorboards. Stacks of books lined the hallway, arranged in leaning towers against wallpaper that had yellowed and peeled in long curls. Every room was filled with heavy, dark wood furniture armoires, velvet chairs, framed paintings in gold leaf frames, portraits of women in wide gowns, men with high collars. Dana suspected none of them had been touched in decades. She moved room to room, cataloging with her eyes, stacks of hat boxes, cabinets full of porcelain dishes, a closet full of coats with fur collars and silk linings. In one bedroom, she found a music box still wound tight. When she lifted the lid, it played a slow, slightly warped lullaby. She closed it gently. The executor handed her a keyring. "Take your time, keep anything you find of value. We just need it cleared." She raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" He gave a tight nod. "I don't have the storage, and no one's claiming the estate. Most of it's sentimental. Maybe something's worth something, but I've been through 3 other homes this year. I don't look too closely anymore." Dana stayed late that evening, clearing one room just to see how long it might take. She filled 6 bags with old linens and cracked shoes. She labeled each bag with masking tape and a Sharpie. Dispose, donate, question. In the dining room, she stood, beneath a chandelier coated in cobwebs and dust. The table beneath it was still set for dinner plates, stacked, cloth napkins folded, though stained now from water damage dripping through the ceiling. A single candlestick lay on its side. She ran her fingers across the edge of a picture frame. Leaning behind a mirror, the woman in it, likely Evelyn or her mother, looked out with unreadable eyes. Dana couldn't explain it, but she felt watched, as if the house wasn't empty so much as waiting. As she locked the door behind her that night, she glanced back at the dark windows. Something inside that house was holding on, and she was going to find out what. The second floor was colder than the rest of the house. Dana noticed it every time she climbed the staircase, the way the air shifted more still, almost damp. The walls narrowed slightly near the top, warped from years of water seeping in through. The roof? She'd been working room by room for 4 days, cataloging everything, loading the truck with what she could, stacking boxes into categorized piles on the main floor. The rooms were all the same at first. Dust-covered side tables, moth-eaten rugs, lamps with cracked glass bases. One room held nothing but crates labeled Hart Shipping Co., each filled with canceled checks and brittle ledgers from the 1950s. In another, she found 6 bird cages. All empty, all stacked like nesting dolls. None of it surprised her anymore. The house seemed to grow stranger the deeper she went, but on the fifth day, while dragging an old trunk down the hall, she noticed something odd. A door near the back corner, recessed between two built-in shelves. It wasn't locked with a padlock, or bolt, just a solid brass knob, but when she turned it, it didn't budge. She tried again. Nothing. No give, no rattle, just resistance. She went back downstairs and found the executor in the study, sorting through papers and answering calls. On a phone that never stopped ringing. He didn't even look up when she spoke. "There's a room upstairs, locked back right corner." "Ah," he said, finally glancing over his glasses. "That one, don't worry about it. Just junk, probably stuck from humidity." Dana waited. "You don't have a key?" He waved a hand. "I'm sure I do, somewhere in that ring I gave you, but there's nothing in there worth pulling out. Old files, tools. Evelyn's father used it for storage back in the day, not part of the inventory." "Still," Dana said slowly, "if I'm clearing the house, I should check it." The man sighed. "If it makes you feel better, sure, but be careful. That door's been closed longer than either of us has been around. Might just crumble if you force it." That night, she sat with the key ring at her kitchen table, holding it in her palm like a puzzle. 37 keys, some small, some ancient, a few labeled with fading ink. One said garage, another had a tag that read pantry, do not lock. She sorted through them until her fingers ached. She returned the next morning with coffee and determination. On her second try, the fifth key slid in. It didn't turn easily, but it turned. She paused before pushing the door open. The hallway was silent. Dust floated in the light slicing through the hallway window. She listened for any thinkreek's movement, the flutter of some forgotten bird, but the house gave her nothing. The door groaned as it opened, the hinges stiff. The smell was heavier, here would rot, something old and dry, like the inside of a chest left in the rain. The room wasn't large, 10 by 10 maybe. The wallpaper had peeled completely off one wall. Shelves lined two sides, but most were empty. A single desk sat beneath the window, covered in a dropcloth that had long since gone brown. A cracked mirror leaned in the corner, the glass fogged with age. In the center of the room, half covered by a faded quilt, was an easel. She didn't move toward it right away. She looked around, first boxers mostly, some marked with dates from the 1940s, a broken clock face, a trunk filled with stiff paintbrushes and dried tubes of oil color. Only after a long moment did she lift the edge of the quilt. The canvas underneath was turned backward. The wooden frame exposed to the room. She rotated it gently, unsure of what she expected. What she saw made her still. It wasn't just a painting, it was a portrait. A woman stood in a sunlit field, half shadowed by trees. Her face was delicate, a resting one hand lifted to her collar, eyes soft, distant. The brushwork was unlike anything Dana had seen before, alive, textured, layers of color pressed together so carefully it looked like skin. She turned back toward the hallway. The house remained silent. The dust swirled lazily in the light. Didn't call the executor right away. Something told her this room hadn't been forgotten. The armoire was too heavy for one person to move, but Dana had learned how to work angles. She pulled open the drawers first, emptying them one by one. Scarves, faded slips, a box of old postcards tied with black string. Then she removed the doors, setting them gently against the opposite wall. Once lightened, she gripped the edge and tilted the whole piece onto sliders she kept in the truck for exactly this reason. It groaned across the wooden floor in slow inches, revealing a strip of wall stained darker than the rest, and something else, something leaning in the corner, barely visible behind dust and burlap. She paused. It could have been anything: wood paneling, leftover insulation, a broken window cover. But as she pulled the armoire further away, the object shifted, just slightly, catching the light in a thin line across its surface. She crouched, reaching. Carefully, the burlap was stiff, crusted at the edges with time and mold. It flaked in her hands. The thing inside was large, heavy. She dragged it out slowly and leaned it against the wall. At first glance, it looked ruined. The canvas was cracked down the middle, curled at the corners, with brown stains trailing along the bottom like water damage. But something in the shape of the frame, its weight, the wood carved into tight grooves, gave her pause. She stood. there for a long time, just staring. Then she peeled the burlap back the rest of the way. The painting revealed itself slowly. A forest scene at first muted greens and grays, hints of a clearing, long shadows stretching toward the foreground, and then, emerging almost imperceptibly from the brush, the figure of a woman. Her back was turned, one hand lifted, the suggestion of motion about to walk, about to vanish. Dana tilted her head. Something about the way the brushstrokes moved made her heart pull tight. It wasn't just technique, it was presence, intentional. She couldn't explain it, but she knew what she was looking at hadn't been painted by an amateur. She should have wrapped it back up. That was her instinct. Label it for storage or disposal, move on to the next corner of the house, but instead she dragged it downstairs, leaning it in the entryway by the main door, where the light filtered through the broken stained glass above. She stared at it while eating her sandwich on the front step. She didn't know why she hadn't just tossed it in the trash pile like the others. When Milo came by after school, she pointed at the canvas without saying anything. He stepped closer, squinting. This from the locked room. "No," she said, behind the armoire guest room. "It looks, I don't know, sad." She nodded slowly. "I almost threw it away." He crouched next to it, fingers tracing the air above the figure's outline. "Something about her looks familiar." Dana swallowed. She'd felt that too. Not the woman exactly, but the colors, the way the background curved in behind her like a breath about to be taken. She thought maybe she'd seen it in a book before, or on a museum wall, but that didn't make sense. The next morning, she called a friend of a friend, an art teacher she'd met on a job 6 months ago, who had mentioned working summers at a gallery. Dana described the canvas in vague terms, careful not to sound too hopeful. The woman agreed to stop by. When she did, her reaction was quiet. She didn't gasp or call it a masterpiece. She didn't rush to identify anything. She just stared, stepped closer, tilted her head like Dana had. Then she asked softly, "Where did you find this?" Dana told her, "Guest room, behind the armoire, buried under dust and doubt." The woman nodded slowly. "Would you mind if I sent a photo to someone I know in Chicago?" Dana shrugged. "It's junk, right?" But something inside her said otherwise. She covered the painting with a clean sheet and waited. Something about it didn't feel like the other things in that house. Not just old, watched, remembered, waiting. She wasn't supposed to bring things home. That was a rule she'd made early on. Keep work at work, junk in the truck, and don't confuse other people's forgotten lives with your own. But the painting sat by the front door of the mansion for 3 days, half covered with a white sheet, and every time she passed it, she looked, not a glance, a pause, a slow, steady gaze like she was waiting for it to move. On the 4th evening, as the sun dipped low and painted orange stripes across the floorboards, she gave in. It took both her and Milo to fit it into the truck bed. She wrapped it with moving blankets, secured it with rope, and drove slowly the 5 miles back to their apartment above the hardware store. No radio, no small talk, just the hum of tires and the weight of something neither of them could name. They leaned it against the far wall in their small living room, just beside the TV stand. It was too tall for the space. The canvas rose nearly to the ceiling, looming like an extra presence in the room. Dana pulled back the blanket carefully. The light from their single lamp wasn't much, but it was enough. Milo stood in front of it with crossed arms. "Mom, ... this looks like something we'd see on a school trip." She glanced at him. "What kind of trip?" "You know, museum. The kind where they make you wear audio headsets and whisper." Dana stepped closer, folding her arms. The woman in the painting still turned away. Still mid-step seemed even more lifelike here, outside the musty mansion, away from the dust and decay. The brushwork was delicate but confident, layered, not just painted, but built. "I keep thinking it reminds me of something," Dana said. "Who's the artist?" She shrugged. "No signature I can see." The corners cracked. They stared in silence for another minute. Then Milo said quietly, "Do you think she's real?" Dana blinked. "You mean like based on a real person?" He nodded. "Feels like it, doesn't it?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she sat on the edge of the couch, rubbing her palm over her jeans. "I've been around a lot of junk, Milo. A lot of junk, and most of it doesn't make you feel anything." "Not really. This does." "Yeah." Later that night, She stayed up after Milo went to bed, reading articles on her phone about art, authentication, and the names of forgotten painters from the early 20th century. She scrolled through pages of forest scenes, female portraits, auction records. Nothing matched, but none of that mattered. She didn't need confirmation yet. What she needed was to understand why she couldn't stop looking at 1 in the morning. She sat alone in the dark, staring at the figure in the painting. The light from the hallway caught her face half visible now, in the curve of the woman's cheek, barely turning. Or maybe that was her imagination. The shadows made it seem like the painting moved when she wasn't watching. She whispered to herself, "Who are you?" The painting didn't answer, but it didn't let her go either. By morning, she'd made up her mind not to sell it, not to display it, just to find out where it came from. Because something about it, something in the lines, the color, the silence, it told her that it mattered. She didn't know yet what that meant, but she trusted her gut, and her gut told her this wasn't junk. She didn't know what she was doing, but she knew how to start. Search terms, that was something she could do. It began the way most deep dives into the unknown begin late at night. Phone dimmed, Milo asleep, a lukewarm mug of tea on the windowsill. Beside her, she typed, "Vintage forest painting woman turned away." The results were disappointing Etsy listings, Pinterest boards, blog posts about hobby painters who liked moody landscapes. None of them looked like the one in her living room. She tried again. Unidentified female portrait painting, 1900s forest background. Still nothing. She clicked image after image, zooming in on brushwork, hoping for a familiar curve of color, a hand posed just so. Something that matched the haunting figure now watching over their rented one-bedroom. After an hour, she gave up the obvious approach and started to break it down. What kind of brush strokes were used? The paint didn't sit flat, it was layered, almost textured. There was movement in the way the trees twisted in the background, a kind of planned chaos that reminded her more of sculpture than paint. She opened a new tab and typed textured brushwork oil painting techniques. The article she found explained something called impasto method, where paint is applied thickly so it stands out from the surface, creating visible texture and depth. She leaned toward the painting and squinted at the canvas. That was it. Definitely. Impasto. New search. Impasto painters, 1930s female subjects. Dozens of names appeared, some familiar from museum visits long ago, some entirely new. She clicked through each one, dragging the image slider, comparing angles and light. It wasn't until the third night, sometime after midnight, when she found an article buried beneath pages of art blogs and auction reports. Not flashy, no headline screaming about treasure or scandal. Just a straightforward page on a Dutch website. She had to use Google Translate. Missing work of Helena Dobrev, last seen 1939. Dana stared. The photo, embedded in the article, wasn't a full match, different background, a different pose, but the woman, same cheekbone angle, same shadow over the brow, same expression like she'd been caught mid-thought and frozen. Helena Dobrev, a name she didn't know. The article said she was born in Bulgaria in 1894. Moved to Paris by 1920, known for her strange ability to capture stillness, to paint women who looked like they breathed beneath the oil. Her early work had been modest, but by the mid-30s, critics whispered she might become a master. Then she disappeared. Her studio was ransacked during the German invasion of France. Several works vanished. One was described as a woman walking into the trees. Dana clicked the tiny footnote link at the bottom of the article. It led to an auction house's catalog from 1983, where one of Dobrev's verified paintings had sold for $1.8 million, the last known one. Her throat felt dry. She stood up, walked to the living room, and turned on the lamp next to the painting. The figure stared ahead, still half-turned. The brushstrokes, soft but deliberate. The light hit the canvas just right, and the woman's hand outstretched ever so slightly seemed to move. Could it be one of the missing pieces? She didn't know, but something in her chest pulled tight like a wire. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about history, presence, the quiet possibility that she'd rescued something, meant to be lost. She sat back down and bookmarked the article. Tomorrow, she'd email someone. Tonight, she'd just sit with it. Not as junk, not as decor, as something she needed to understand. He arrived 10 minutes early. A short man with round glasses and a brown corduroy blazer, holding a leather satchel tucked tight under one arm. His name was Professor Theo Marching, chair of art history at the nearby college, recommended by the gallery contact Dana had spoken to briefly over the phone. The woman hadn't said much, only that he knows his Oz and had a particular interest in lost European artists. Dana opened the door with paint still on her jeans. She'd spent the morning cleaning the apartment, which mostly meant moving things out of sight. The painting stood in the far corner, covered with a light cotton sheet, quiet and looming. Double quotes, Ms. Halberg, he asked. Dana, come in. He stepped inside without looking around. His eyes went straight to the covered canvas. That's it, she nodded. I haven't moved it since I brought it back. I thought maybe light or humidity. You were right not to. May I? Dana crossed the room and slowly pulled the sheet off. Professor Marching didn't say anything at first. He didn't gasp or smile. He didn't reach for his glasses. He just stood there, arms at his sides, and stared. The silence stretched. Dana didn't rush him. He stepped closer, adjusting his angle as if viewing a sundial. He leaned not to touch, but to study the curve of the brushwork. His eyes narrowed slightly at the cracks in the lower left corner. Then he took a full step back. Where exactly did you find this? He asked, still facing the painting. A house I was clearing out, a state cleanout. There was a locked room. This was behind a piece of furniture in the room next to it. It was wrapped in burlap, almost trashed it. He hummed low, thoughtful. He turned toward her. Would you sit down, please? Her heart stuttered. She moved to the couch slowly and sat on the edge, hands pressed between her knees. It's not a print, he said first. That was clear immediately. The paint is oil, likely Lindsay-based. The cracking is consistent with canvases from the 1930s. The canvas stretch. The nail pattern on the back. This wasn't student work. This is someone who knew what they were doing. So, ... It could be something, Ms. Halberg, ... It's not just something. He took off his glasses and cleaned them on the edge of his blazer. You said it was in a house that belonged to Evelyn Hart. Reclusive woman, lived alone. No family claimed the estate. Any European connections? I don't know, the lawyer didn't say. He put his glasses back on and sat. Across from her. I can't give you a certificate. That would require a panel. But I've taught for 30 years. I've seen thousands of works. And I'm telling you, this is in the style of Helena Dobra, perhaps even her hand. The texture, the motion, the light manipulation. This could be one of the missing paintings. Dana blinked. Missing. There were at least 4 documented as lost during the war. One matches the description. Into the forest, unnamed. Never photographed. Disappeared with the rest of her studio in 1939. She looked at the painting again. Is it valuable? He smiled, but it was gentle, not amused. If authenticated, yes. Very. How valuable? He hesitated. If this is real, ... possibly tens of millions. But that's beside the point. It's not beside the point to me, she said softly. No, I suppose not. They both stared at the canvas again. The woman inside it remained still, mid-step, as if waiting for the right moment to finish walking away. Professor Marching stood. I'd like permission to photograph it. I'll send it to a contact in Europe, someone familiar with Dobrev's lesser-known pieces. We'll take it slow. Carefully, Dana nodded, voice low. Okay. As he adjusted the light to take the first shot, he said quietly, some things survive for a reason, Ms. Halberg, even when people forget they matter. She didn't say anything, but she believed him. Dana didn't sleep that night. She lay on the couch in the dark, eyes fixed on the corner where the painting rested, half covered again under the soft sheet. It was no longer just a found object, not even just an artwork. The air around it felt heavier now, as if knowing it had been seen for what it might be, had stirred something awake the next morning. Professor Marching returned not alone this time. With him was a woman in her early 60s, tall, with silver hair pulled into a tight twist, and glasses that stayed balanced halfway down her nose. She introduced herself as Dr. Lisette Mercier, an expert in European art lost during World War II. Her accent was French, but softened by years abroad. She didn't smile, but she nodded to Dana with quiet respect. They didn't ask to see the painting immediately. First, they asked for the details again, where she'd found it, how it had been stored, what the room looked like. Dana answered. Everything. She even described the musty smell, the burlap wrap, the corner of the frame cracked from years of pressure. Finally, they pulled the sheet away. Lisette stood still for a long moment. Her shoulders rose slowly as she breathed in, then let it out. Theo Marchang spoke first. We think it may not be Dobrev, as we first assumed. Dana's stomach dropped. Oh, but that isn't bad news, he added quickly. Lisette stepped forward. I believe this may be La Dormusa Lost Painting by Émile Legrand. You know the name? Dana shook her head. He was a student of Bonnard, a contemporary of Vuillard. Quiet, private, created only a handful of large-scale oil portraits before his death in 1941, 5 in total. La Dormusa Sleeper was his most mysterious work. It was exhibited once in 1938 in Paris, then disappeared. There are no photographs of it, only written descriptions. Dana looked at the painting. But this woman isn't sleeping. Lisette nodded. That's the misconception. She was described as suspended in the moment before sleep, her back turned, retreating into solitude. Matches almost perfectly. Theo added, the canvas measurements are consistent with the original exhibition notes. The brushwork, palette, and layering. Everything fits. Dana felt the couch press up against her knees. She leaned on it without sitting, unsure if her legs would keep holding. Lisette moved closer to the canvas, pulling out gloves and a small magnifying loupe. We'll need infrared imaging to be sure. A pigment analysis, possibly carbon dating. On the stretcher wood. But if this is La Dormusa, she trailed off. Theo picked it up. It was stolen during the Nazi occupation. Legrand's studio was ransacked in late 1940. Several works vanished. The Nazis were known to sell or trade valuable art through private channels. Some ended up in private collections. Others were hidden away and forgotten. Dana whispered, and somehow it ended up behind a cabinet in a stranger's house. Theo gave a half smile, more common than you'd think. After the war, a lot of stolen art was quietly passed down through families who didn't even know what they had. Especially in the US when soldiers or private buyers brought things back. Lisette stepped back. If this is the original La Dormusa, it could be worth upwards of $75 million. Dana blinked. Million? Yes. And it may belong to the Legrand estater, possibly to a restitution claim, depending on how it left Europe. Dana rubbed her forehead. I don't even know what that means yet. Lisette softened. It means, for now, we move carefully. With respect, with documentation, you've done nothing wrong. You saved something that was about to be thrown away, Theo added, and you may have just found one of the greatest missing works of 20th century European art. The room felt too small for the truth, now resting inside it. Dana looked at the painting again. It hadn't changed. The woman still stood, turning away. But now, she seemed less distant, less unknowable, like someone who had been waiting to be found. The first call came on a Wednesday, just after she'd dropped Milo off at school. Her phone buzzed with an unknown New York number, and she almost didn't answer. She was elbow-deep in boxes from a routine garage cleanout, hands covered in dust and packing tape residue. But something nudged her to pick up, double quotes, "Hello, is this Ms. Dana Halberg?" Her voice caught. "Yes, this is Catherine Wu, curator with the New York Art Institute. I believe you have a painting in your possession that may be of interest to our European Acquisitions Division." Dana froze, her free hand gripping the edge of a sagging cardboard box. "How did you?" "We were contacted by Dr. Mercier, who has worked with our restoration department in the past. She sent preliminary photos. We would be honored to discuss the possibility of temporary custody for conservation, insurance, and historical documentation." Dana had to lean against the garage wall. "I haven't agreed to anything yet." "Of course not. We're not asking for a decision. Just a conversation." By the end of the day, 3 more emails sat in her inbox. One from a London gallery with a polite, restrained subject line, inquiry regarding lost Legrand work. Another from a museum in Geneva, offering to facilitate authentication in accordance with international cultural property standards. The third was less formal, from a private collector's representative in Zurich, requesting a meeting at her earliest convenience. Each email read like it had been written by someone trying not to scare her. Soft language, careful tone, words like potential, possible provenance, And should this prove to be... But even Dana, whose knowledge of fine art came mostly from Google and the occasional museum field trip with Milo, could feel the urgency beneath the surface. These people didn't chase shadows, they chased treasure. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the laptop screen, the old light bulb flickering faintly overhead. In the corner, the painting stood like it always had, quiet, still unbothered by the storm now building around it. When Milo came home, she told him, "Do you know what the New York Art Institute is?" she asked. He dropped his backpack and blinked. "It's in every art book. They called me Mifros, they called you, and London, and Geneva, and some woman I've never met who claims she's representing a private buyer." He dropped into the chair across from her. "What do they want?" "Everything," she said, not unkindly. Milo turned to look at the painting. "It's still. Weird to think we almost left it behind." "I almost left me behind," Dana said softly. The days that followed moved fast. Her phone rang constantly. Messages piled up. Reporters reached out local news first, then bigger names she'd only seen scrolling headlines. She didn't return most of them. Instead, she made lists, wrote questions, Googled more laws than she'd ever known existed. Terms like cultural restitution, legal title of art, Nazi-era provenance, and repatriation claims filled her browser history. She started to understand that it wasn't just about owning the painting. It was about who had a right to it, and who had the means to fight for that right. But through it all, the most surprising thing was how people changed when they heard the number $75 million. Old classmates started texting. An ex-coworker asked if she'd consult on a new startup idea. Her sister, who hadn't returned calls in months, sent a cheerful voice memo ending with, "So proud of you, sis." Dana sat in the quiet of her apartment, phone buzzing on the counter, and thought about how quickly worth could shift, how fast someone could go from invisible to valuable, just because of what they happened to hold. But the painting didn't change. It never did. It just stood there, waiting, unimpressed, untouched by the noise. The painting left her apartment on a Tuesday morning, sealed in a temperature-controlled crate marked "fragile handle with care." 2 men from the conservator's lab arrived with a checklist and a padded dolly. Dana watched them secure it with soft straps, the same way someone might handle an infant. She didn't cry, but her chest felt hollow as the door shut behind it. She stood in the silence for a while after they left. The wall where the painting had stood now bare and pale. A shadow still lingered in the dust. The testing process began. Immediately, Professor Marching and Dr. Mercier kept her updated with clinical precision. A preliminary pigment analysis confirmed the use of rare earth minerals found in early 20th century European paint, particularly in French studios. The canvas fibers matched a known supplier used by Legrand's contemporaries. The underlayer brushwork, revealed through infrared scanning, suggested a composition sketch, a common practice among painters who treated each piece as a masterwork, rather than a study. Then came the signature, or rather the suggestion of one dot in the bottom right corner. Nearly lost beneath cracked varnish and years of grime, a faint inscription began to emerge. The lab used spectral imaging to enhance it. A cursive EL followed, by the tail of what might have once been the final letter of Legrand. No flourish, no date. Just enough to whisper, not scream. The experts grew careful with their language, probable attribution, substantial alignment with known works, high confidence, pending peer review. For Dana, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, watching the water rise. By the second week, a new voice entered the process. Legal counsel. She hadn't hired anyone, but her phone buzzed with numbers offering pro bono help. Eventually, she met with a soft-spoken woman named Carla Ruiz, who specialized in cultural restitution cases. Carla wore navy suits and carried a thin binder filled with articles, court precedents, and worst-case scenarios. She explained that ownership might not be simple. If the painting had been stolen during the Nazi occupation, as was increasingly likely, there could be claims from descendants of the original owners. Some governments might intervene. Even museums could stake a case, especially if public funds were needed for preservation. "You didn't do anything wrong," Carla assured her more than once. "You acted in good faith." But when art crosses borders under darkness, history gets complicated. Dana listened carefully. She asked questions. She took notes. Then she signed the retainer. Meanwhile, the media circle tightened. What began as a whisper among art circles grew louder. Local news ran a segment calling her the junk lady who found gold. A morning show anchor mentioned the painting in a lighthearted voiceover between celebrity gossip and weather. By week's end, a national paper published an article titled, "The $75 million Mistake Almost Thrown." Out with the trash, she stopped answering unknown numbers. She closed her social media accounts. Her sister sent another message, this one saying, "Don't forget the people who've always believed in you." Dana didn't respond. Milo stayed quiet through most of it, but one night over dinner he said, "Are you scared?" She looked at him a little. "Why?" "Because nothing prepares you for being seen, especially not like this." He nodded, tearing his sandwich crust. "But you didn't do anything wrong." "I know," she said, "but people don't always care about that." Still, beneath the swirl of tests and headlines and legal language, one truth steadied her. The painting was real. Whatever came next, disputes, headlines, auctions, courtrooms, it was real, not imagined. Not junk. Something that had been lost had been found, and she had been the one to find it. She was in the middle of sorting invoices when her phone rang. The screen lit up with a number she didn't recognize out of state. No contact photo, no label. She considered letting it go to voicemail, but something about the timing made her swipe instead. "Hello?" There was a pause, a faint breath on the line. "Hey, Dana, it's me." Her chest went still. She didn't need a name. The voice hadn't changed. That particular mix of self-assured and performative concernate hadn't aged a day. "I know it's been a while," he said. She didn't answer. "Not yet. I was just thinking about you. About everything. About ... US." Dana stood up from the kitchen table. She walked toward the window, phone pressed against her ear, her other hand curled into a fist without realizing. "I saw the news," he continued, his tone light as if he were talking about the weather. "That painting thing? Wild. I mean, wow. You always had an eye for weird stuff, I guess." She closed her eyes. Let him talk. "I was just thinking," he went on. "Maybe we rushed into the whole divorce thing. We were going through a rough patch. People go through things. That doesn't mean they're over. Maybe we should have tried harder." She felt her breath sit in her throat. Not angry, not sad, just tired. Not surprised, but not numb either. He kept going, unaware. "You know, if we'd stuck it out, we'd both be laughing about this now. You and me, business partners, maybe even remarried." She hung up. Just like that, no word, no warning. The line cut off mid-sentence. The screen returned to home. Silence. She placed the phone face down on the table and sat back down. The invoices were still there. Her hands shook slightly, but she didn't cry. She wasn't shaken in the way she would have been a year ago, or even 6 months ago. She was just ... done. Later that night, Milo asked why she was quiet during dinner. "Your dad called," she said simply. He paused mid-bite. "What did he want?" "To remind me who he still is," she said, pushing her food around with a fork. That's all. Milo didn't press. He didn't have to. The call had been inevitable. The attention surrounding the painting had grown louder. It was only a matter of time before old voices tried to attach themselves to something they once discarded. She remembered the last time she saw him in person, the way he slid the divorce papers across the table like a menu he'd already decided against. No eye contact, no apology, just the quiet suggestion that it was for the best. He left with the car, the house, and most of the savings. Left her with legal fees, joint debt, and their son's disappointed silence. He hadn't called when Milo turned 15, or when Dana's mother passed, or when she emailed him twice about unpaid school fees. But now, he wanted to talk about us. She almost laughed, thinking about it. There was no us. There was only her and Milo, and the junk removal business built out of nothing but resolve. Scraped together tools and 4 a.m. flyers, and the painting that had survived a war, a basement, and decades of silence just to sit quietly in her hands. That night, she finally deleted his number from her phone. Not blocked, not ignored, deleted, because she didn't need to build walls. Already built a life. The call came in the late afternoon, when the light in the apartment turned soft and gold and made everything feel momentarily still. Dana was folding laundry socks and t-shirts, mostly the kind of domestic quiet that had come to mean stability, in a way she hadn't known to value before. Dr. Mercier's voice on the phone was calm, precise, and measured. "We've confirmed the provenance." Dana sat down slowly, laundry forgotten. "And the painting was originally owned by the Weissman family," Lisette said. "Hung in their home in Paris until 1940. According to archival letters, it was purchased directly from Legrand shortly before the war. They were avid supporters of local artist quiet collectors. Private people." Dana could picture it maybe a parlor with patterned wallpaper, a high-backed chair beneath the frame. She didn't interrupt. "In June of 1940, the family's apartment was raided by German forces. The artwork, along with several others, was seized. We don't know exactly who took it, but we have documentation showing it entered a private German collection sometime before 1942. "Who were the Weissmans?" Dana asked. "A husband and wife, Jakob and Miriam. They had one son, Levi Jakob, was a bookseller. They were deported in 1943. No records beyond that." Dana swallowed. "Did anyone survive?" "Levi did," Lisette replied. "He was 13 when the war ended. He emigrated to the U.S. in 1947. We found a mention of him in a restitution claim filed in the 1960s, naming several missing items, including La Dormeuse. At the time, no one knew where it had gone." Dana didn't speak. She stared at the corner of the room where the painting had stood. "We believe it changed hands several times," Lisette continued. "It passed through an Austrian dealer in the 1950s, then showed up in a private collection in Belgium. After that, it vanished. The last trace is a shipping invoice from 1971 to a New York address. The name on the document matches an uncle of Evelyn Hart, the woman whose house you cleaned." "So she inherited it?" Dana asked. "Unknowingly, most likely. It could have been kept in storage, forgotten, or dismissed as unimportant. But the paperwork fits. There's a clear thread from 1942 now." Dana felt a kind of numb clarity. "What does this mean for me?" Lisette's tone softened. "It means the Weissman family has a legal and moral claim to the painting. Levi Weissman passed away in 2003, but he had a daughter. Her name is Naomi Weissman Drucker. She lives in Massachusetts. We've contacted her." Dana nodded, even though no one could see her, "and she wants it back." "She does," Lisette confirmed gently. "She was very gracious, very moved. She's been searching for traces of her family's story her whole life. This painting was the only item her father ever mentioned with longing. He described it in a journal as the last thing we saw before leaving home." Dana closed her eyes. It hadn't been hers to find, not truly. It had only passed through her hands. "I want her to have it," she said. "You have the right to." "Compensation," Lisette reminded her. "Legally, you found it in good faith. Any sale or transfer would honor your role in its recovery." "I don't care about that right now," Dana said. "Let her have it, just tell her I said thank you." "For what?" "For remembering what it looked like. That's the only reason we know it's real." She hung up the phone, folded the last sock, and sat quietly in the small kitchen. Milo came home 20 minutes later, and when she told him, he didn't say much at first. Then he asked, "Are you sad?" She thought about it. "No," she said. "I'm not sad. What are you?" She looked out the window at the late sun, turning the sky pale orange. "I'm the person who got to carry it home." The first official offer came in a thick envelope delivered by courier. It was printed on heavy cream cardstock and signed with the name of a gallery Dana had only ever read about in magazines. One that hosted champagne-soaked galas and counted hedge fund billionaires among its regular clients. The number at the bottom of the letter read $10 million. Clean, immediate, no questions asked. 2 days later, another offer came. Then another. Then another. Her kitchen table turned into a growing stack of envelopes and printed emails. London, Tokyo, Abu Dhabi. One from a discreet representative who said his client wished to remain anonymous, but would wire $75 million upon confirmation of exclusive ownership. No exhibition required. No interviews, just silence. Each offer was higher than the last. Each one came with language that sounded more like pressure, disguised as praise. "This would be a triumph for your legacy. It is a rare opportunity for you and your family. You would be honoring the painting by placing it in the care of those who understand its worth." She didn't answer any of them. Not at first. Instead, she took Milo on a drive. They didn't go far, just up the coast a little, where the sea met the rocks, and the wind felt clean. They parked the old truck near a lookout point and sat on the hood with sandwiches between them. The sun was low. Gulls circled above. It was the kind of moment she hadn't known she was allowed to have. "I don't want to sell it," she said. Milo looked at her, not surprised. "Even after everything?" he asked. She nodded. "Especially after everything." He didn't argue. She didn't know how to explain it. Not really. The painting wasn't just a canvas or a number on an offer sheet. It was a witness. A survivor. It had passed through hands that had known fear and silence and displacement. It had been taken, hidden, forgotten, and nearly discarded. And somehow, despite all that, it still existed. It still held the same light, the same brushstroke of a man who had painted not for glory, but because he had something quiet to say. Selling it felt wrong. It felt like putting a price on something that didn't belong to any one person. The art world, of course, didn't understand this, or pretended not to. "You could change your entire life," one dealer told her during a brief call. "Homes, travel, security for your son. This is a once-in-a-century opportunity." But Dana already had changed her life. Without the money, without the fanfare, she'd built a business from scratch. Paid off debt in pieces. Earned back her dignity one junk-filled garage at a time. She didn't need $75 million to prove her worth. At night, she stood in the living room and stared at the blank wall where the painting had once been. She could still see its outline in her mind, the way the woman's shoulders curved just slightly inward, the way the muted color of her dress blended into the shadow behind her. She didn't want it to disappear into a vault or a collection she'd never see. She didn't want it hung behind velvet ropes, turned into a symbol for someone else's wealth. She wanted it where it belonged. So the next morning, she called Lisette. "Can you ask Naomi something for me?" She said, "Of course." Lisette replied, "Ask her if she'd ever want it back. Not just legally, but to live with it. To hang it somewhere, it matters." "You don't want the sale?" Dana smiled, small and sure. "No, I want it to matter." The offers would keep coming. She knew that, but her answer had already arrived. Not in dollars, not in fame, in the silence of the woman in the painting, and the choice to let her stay free. They decided to meet in a quiet corner of a library. Not a museum, not a gallery, but a place where memory felt like it lived gently between pages. Naomi Weissman Drucker arrived just before noon, carrying a small black leather bag and wearing a silver pin shaped like an open book. Her posture was careful, not stiff, but contained. Like someone who had spent a lifetime holding grief with dignity. Dana stood up to greet her, unsure of what to say. But Naomi smiled first. "You're younger than I imagined," she said softly. "And you're taller," Dana replied, then immediately regretted it. But Naomi laughed. It wasn't loud, but it was real. They sat at a back table, away from the noise of college students and the quiet rustle of pages. Between them lay a thin manila folder Naomi had brought, though she didn't open it right away. She just looked at Dana, eyes thoughtful. "I've imagined this conversation for most of my adult life," Naomi said, "and now that I'm sitting here, I can't quite believe it's real." Dana didn't respond right away. She waited. Naomi finally unfolded the file. Inside were black and white photographs. One showed a young couple standing on the steps of a narrow Parisian townhouse. The woman wore a long skirt and held a book against her hip. The man, slender and smiling, had a hand resting on her shoulder. "My grandparents," Naomi said, "Jacob and Miriam Weissman. That house behind them, number 6, Rue Merivaths, where La Dormeuse used to hang." In their reading room, Dana leaned in. Naomi slid another photo across the table. It was dated 1938. This one showed a wall with a fireplace. Above it, though blurred slightly by the old lens, was the painting. Same angle, same quiet figure. The woman in repose, her eyes closed, head slightly tilted, toward an unseen window. "My father remembered it most vividly," Naomi said. "He would tell me about the way the light from the street would hit it in the mornings. He said it always looked like the woman was just beginning to wake." Dana's throat tightened. "I didn't expect to find it," Naomi continued. "My father filed the paperwork. Yes, but he never really believed. He just needed to know he'd tried." They were quiet for a moment. Then Dana said, "I almost threw it away." Naomi looked at her, but there was no judgment, only calm. "I believe you," she said. "I didn't know what it was. I found it behind an old armoire wrapped in burlap. It was covered in dust. I thought it was just more junk." "But you didn't throw it away." "No," Dana said. "I didn't." Naomi smiled again. "And you didn't sell it either. You had every opportunity." Dana shrugged. "It didn't feel like mine to sell." Naomi leaned back, her eyes glassy now, most people would have. Dana nodded. "But most people don't start junk removal businesses after divorce court either." That made them both laugh. Over the next hour, they talked not about money or legality or museums, but about memory. Naomi spoke of her father's nightmares, of his silence, of how he had stopped speaking French after they arrived in the US, as though language itself had betrayed him. Dana spoke of rebuilding a life from leftover things, of finding value in objects everyone else had given up on. They didn't cry not in the way people do in movies. But there was something shared between them, a stillness, a respect. When they stood to leave, Naomi gently reached for Dana's hand. "I don't think she was ever asleep," she said, referring to the painting. "I think she was just waiting." Dana squeezed her fingers. "So were you." They left the library side by side, two women bound not by blood or history, but by something older and harder to name. A story rescued and handed back. The check sat on the counter for 3 days before she touched it, not out of hesitation, but because something in her wanted to understand its weight before cashing it. The amount printed across the top was more than she'd ever imagined seeing. In her lifetime, more than she thought could even exist in one place, with her name attached. It didn't come from a museum or a gallery. It came from a quiet settlement agreement between herself and the Weissman family. Half the value of the painting, after authentication and legal fees, transferred to her as recognition for recovering. It was clean, mutual, and most importantly fair. She stared at the number for a long time before folding it back into its envelope. She didn't go shopping, didn't book a flight, didn't buy a car instead. She walked the 2 miles to the community center where she'd once sat in a plastic chair filling out a job application. She was never called back for she walked past the cracked linoleum floors and the water-stained ceiling tiles. She stepped into the same room where she'd watched a group of women practice job interviews, their voices shaking as they rehearsed phrases like team player and reliable transportation. That night, she emailed a lawyer and asked what it would take to start a fund. The paperwork took longer than she expected. There were questions about structure, sustainability, tax filings, oversight, but she moved through it carefully, meeting with accountants and advisors who didn't talk down to her because she wouldn't let them. She named the fund quietly, no fanfare, no headlines. Just one sentence on a website with a soft gray background, a fund for women rebuilding from nothing. The first grant went to a woman named Leanne, who had fled an abusive marriage with her 2 daughters and had been sleeping in her car while trying to finish a welding certificate. Dana met her once, briefly. When Leanne came to thank her in person, she had calloused hands and eyes that rarely stayed still. The second grant went to a refugee, family from Syria, mother and son, much like Dana and Milo once were in spirit, even if not in circumstance. They used the money to cover apartment rent for 6 months, while the mother enrolled in language classes and her son started high school. By the end of the first quarter, 10 families had received grants. Some started businesses, others just used the money to breathe to afford medication, uniforms, a used laptop. Dana didn't oversee the stories closely. She didn't need updates or photos or handwritten notes. She just needed to know that it mattered. That something as absurd and delicate as a painting in a basement could turn into something solid. A roof, a bus pass, a full fridge. When Milo asked why she didn't keep it all, she just looked at him. "Because we're okay now," she said. "But we weren't before," he said quietly. "I know. That's the point." She didn't tell many people about the fund. Her sister found out later and didn't quite know what to say. Former clients who once paid her in crumpled 20s still called her the junk lady. But now, the name didn't sting. If anything, it felt earned. She had taken the junk hers others and made something new out of it. Her apartment stayed modest. The business kept running. She hired 2 part-time workers and bought a second truck. She still wore her work gloves, still climbed stairs to attics filled with rusted bed frames and boxers of tangled cords. Wealth didn't change her. Not in the way people expect. because it was never about the money. It was about being able to choose, and choosing to lift someone else while she did. The company van no longer had duct tape over the back window. The new logo, still hand-drawn, still simple now, read, "Second Chance Hauling and Preservation." Below it, in smaller letters, were the words, "Not everything worth saving looks." Valuable at first glance, it started as a joke something, Milo said one night, after she pulled a water-stained book of war letters from a client's trash pile. "Maybe you should open a museum for sad objects," he'd said. But the phrase stayed with her. Sad objects, forgotten things. Items people no longer had space for, not just in their homes, but in their lives. One client called after his mother, passed asking her to clean out a basement. Dana found hundreds of journals, neatly labeled, dating back to 1954. She paused before hauling them away and called him. The man drove over, glanced at the pile, and said, "I didn't know she kept those." He ended up reading them for weeks and cried when he found an entry about the day he was born. Another time, she found a sealed envelope in an old coat pocket. Inside was a photo and a note in cursive that read, "Forgive me." She didn't read the rest, but she returned it. The daughter who hired her didn't even know her father had served in Korea. It kept happening. Not always dramatic, not always tragic, but quietly meaningful. So she added a new line to her intake forms. "Do you want us to preserve anything you may have missed?" That's when the work changed. It wasn't just hauling broken chairs or old TVs anymore. It became something more tender, a kind of witnessing. Her crew didn't just remove, they sifted. They asked, they listened. And when people didn't want the stories back, Dana kept them with permission. She started archiving the pieces, postcards, annotated cookbooks, faded photographs. She built a small online project called The Left Behind, where people could read excerpts, see images, and remember strangers through their objects. She hired people who understood loss. A woman named Jo, a single mom who used to teach history, joined her as the team's story specialist. A veteran named Troy handled larger jobs and once paused mid-haul to tape a child's drawing back together, placing it carefully in a bin labeled "Keep." Dana never required her team to have experience. She looked for something else: patience, kindness. The ability to recognize that value wasn't always visible. She paid a living wage, offered flexible hours, made room for doctor's appointments, school pickups, and quiet days when grief showed up without warning. The community changed its tune. The same people who used to smirk when she pulled up now greeted her with quiet nods. Some brought her tea. Others asked about that painting thing. She never talked about the money, only about the idea that sometimes the things we throw away aren't garbage. They're just waiting for someone to see them. Her son helped build a small digital catalog where they could track every item returned to families. Milo called it the recovery shelf. They even partnered with a local librarian to host an exhibit featuring artifacts saved from the landfill of letters. Handmade dolls, a melted candle that once marked a wedding anniversary. People started donating items instead of discarding them. Not for resale, but for memory, for record, for someone else to see and remember. Dana still wore gloves, still climbed attic stairs, still took out the trash. But now, sometimes, before tossing something, she paused and looked at it, because every object, even the rusted ones, had a story, and someone, somewhere, might still need to hear it. She first saw the article while waiting in line at the post office. Folded behind a rack of greeting cards, the local paper bore a black and white photo of her standing in front of the old truck, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun. The headline read, "The Woman Who Found the Lost Legrand." She stared at it for a long moment, unsure whether to laugh or just walk away. The clerk at the window, recognizing her, smiled. "That's you, right? Saw you on the news last night, too." Dana gave a half nod. She wasn't used to attentionist. Her name appeared in places she'd never expected. Small mentions in national papers, a blurb on an art history blog, even an early morning interview on the local radio station, where the host kept calling her Miss Dana like they were neighbors, even though they'd never met. The media painted her as a mystery, a fluke, a symbol of unlikely fortune. They called it a Cinderella story with work gloves, a lucky break, a modern-day treasure hunt. What they didn't see, what they never really asked about, were the years in between. The unpaid bills, The mildew-stained walls? The loneliness of pushing a dolly up a gravel driveway at 6 in the morning, knowing nobody was going to open the door with a smile. She kept her uniform the same. Dark canvas pants, faded jacket with frayed cuffs. Her name tag still stitched, with the original logo back when the company was just her, and a borrowed truck and a cardboard box of cheap flyers. People started coming up to her in parking lots. Some asked for selfies. Others told her their own stories about paintings. Their grandparents had, or attic trunks, they'd never opened. A few asked if she'd consider franchising. One woman from the city called to offer her a reality show. Dana politely declined. Not because she didn't appreciate the curiosity, but because none of it had anything to do with why she'd started. She hadn't gone looking for fame. She had gone looking for a way forward. At home, she still swept her own floors. Milo still left cereal bowls in the sink. The dog still barked at the mailman. They still ate dinner at the same table, with a missing leg propped up by books. And she still showed up for work. One morning, as she and Joe loaded the van, a teenager on a bike slowed down and pointed. "Hey, that's the junk lady." His voice was loud enough to turn heads. Dana braced herself, but Joe just smiled and called back, "That's Ms. Junk Lady to you." The kid laughed and rode off. Dana looked down at her jacket. The name tag had a new smudge on it, probably coffee. She didn't care. Later that day, as she knelt in someone's garage, sorting through boxes of mismatched china and faded holiday decorations, she found herself thinking about the painting, again the value. Not the headlines, but the moment she first unwrapped it, the dust, the quiet, the odd feeling in her chest that something about it was important. Even before she had words for it, that feeling, that gut instinct to pause, to look closer, had followed her through every job since. It wasn't about art, it was about noticing. Seeing what others missed. By the time she got home that night, her boots were muddy and her back ached. But the business had booked 3 more jobs, all from word of mouth. No ads, no press releases, just people telling people. She hung up her jacket and smoothed the patch on the front. The logo was faded now, but her name was still there. Not the woman who found the lost Legren, just Dana. And that was enough. The office wasn't big, just a converted back room in the same building where she used to rent storage space by the hour. The walls were freshly painted but still uneven in places. The floors creaked, the windows stuck. But to Dana, it felt solid, like something she'd built with her own hands. Even if the drywall had been installed by someone else. There was no receptionist, no glass nameplate on the door, just a wooden sign, Milo, made out of reclaimed lumber, carved with the words, "Second Chance Hauling and Preservation." Underneath it, in smaller letters, he'd added, "Dana's desk do not leave coffee rings." It made her smile every time she walked in. She kept the space simple, a wide work table. 2 chairs, one for her, one for whoever needed to sit across. From her, a filing cabinet that was always partially open, a whiteboard with reminders written in fading blue marker, a corkboard with clipped notes from clients scribbled in messy pen. "Thank you for finding my mom's recipe cards. I thought it was gone forever. You saw what I couldn't." But above her desk hung something no one ever expected, not the painting that had been returned to its rightful home. Not a newspaper clipping or a certificate. It was the burlap, the same coarse, rough fabric she'd found wrapped around the frame in the corner of the mansion, still creased, still dusty, in parts, still smelling faintly of time. She had framed it, not ironed, not cleaned, not trimmed, just stretched lightly in a matte black frame, the way you'd frame a canvas. It sat there, unassuming, quiet. Most people didn't even notice it at first. It looked like nothing, a blank, a mistake. But Dana looked at it every day, because she remembered what it had been wrapped around. She remembered how close she'd come to throwing it out. She remembered how it had felt in her hands, too rough to be fabric, too heavy to be empty. She remembered trusting her gut, pausing just long enough to wonder. She'd had to argue with the framer. He had asked, gently, "Are you sure you want to hang this?" She had nodded. "It's just burlap." "I know," she said. "That's the point." It became a kind of anchor in the room. When she sat down with new hires women, with resumes that had gaps and stories, too big for paper, she'd sometimes point to it. "See that?" she'd say. They'd squint. "The frame," she'd nod. "That was around a painting worth $7 million. Silence always followed, sometimes disbelief, sometimes laughter. Then she'd say, "Don't underestimate what's under the surface." The burlap wasn't beautiful. It wasn't grand, but it told the story better than any article could, about judgment, about assumption, about how easy it is to throw something away just because no one else sees its value. It wasn't about the money, or the painting, or the accident of stumbling on a masterpiece. It was about what happens when you look again, when you choose not to dismiss, when you give something or someone a second glance. The office slowly filled with objects like that, not expensive ones, just things with meaning. A chipped teacup from a house fire, a broken music box that still played 2 notes, a letter unsigned that simply said, "You are not invisible." Dana kept working. The business grew. The name changed. In tone, no longer a punchline, now a quiet kind of respect. But she never stopped looking, never stopped sifting through the overlooked, because the burlap reminded her every day that sometimes the wrapper tells you nothing, and sometimes the person who unwraps it tells you everything.